Hello guys, Ethan here. Welcome to our channel Anime Fantasy. Join us as we explore the world of anime and fantasy and bring you the best stories and discussions. This is the third part of What If Naruto Was an Attack on Titan verse, so give this video a like and subscribe for more videos. In future, Naruto slipped silently through the allies of the city, avoiding any attention as he predicted the people lived inside the walls and Titans were kept outside. Now that he'd found civilization at last, Naruto had decided to ditch the soldiers and start gathering information about the world in general. The clone he'd left behind had dispelled once they'd stopped for good, alerting him on what place to avoid. His sudden disappearance would no doubt raise the alarm, which was unfortunate but unavoidable. His actions would paint him in a negative light and most likely make the government suspicious. From their point of view, he was an outsider that had used them as a means to infiltrate their home and yet following a foreign military straight into their base without any prior knowledge of their intent, ability, technology, or numbers with was a gamble Naruto was unwilling to take. The one thing that worked in his favor, however, and made taking the risk of making the government his enemy worth it, was his ability to use the hench. If they didn't have chakra, it was only logical to assume that they had no means of identifying him if he were to disguise himself, meaning he could explore without fretting about being recognized, roamed the streets for a short while just to get an impression of what the average person looked like. Most were either brown-haired or blonde with either blue or brown eyes. It felt kind of bizarre seeing so many of them here. He was so used to being one of the only fair-haired and blue-eyed people in Konoha. Still, he needed to modify his appearance. He'd noticed the subtle look citizens had given him when he wandered the streets. Naruto ran a hand through his golden gravity-defying spiky hair. He stood out too much, especially his whisker marks. He glanced down at his clothes, lamenting their current state. As much as it pained him, they would have to go as well. His bright orange and black jumpsuit was a dead giveaway, making sure he was alone now. Naruto made the dog bore and hand seals. He removed his whiskers, colored his hair and eyes brown, and lightened the color of his skin to a shade more reminiscent of Anichiha. Naruto walked over to one of the nearby windows and eyed his new appearance. It would do for now, at least. Strolled lazily down the streets of Karensu, observing his surroundings keenly. People walked past minding their own business. Stall owners called out to bypassing civilians in their strange language, and children played without a care in the world. And yet behind the facade of normality there was a slight tension hanging in the air. An underlying note of fear permeated the streets. He could feel it the way people looked at the walls every so often, thinking, wondering. He'd felt it before when he'd been just a child in Konoha. Of course he'd been source of all those feelings back then, though he hadn't known why. It was laughably easy, Naruto thought to himself, wandering the streets with a henge, knowing they wouldn't be able to identify him. He had to catch himself sometimes, though. A civilian would cast a glance his way and he'd start getting the idea that people were onto him, only to realize it was pure coincidence that their eyes had met. He let his eyes roam over the streets and the houses that lined its length, drawing some conclusions. The architecture was reminiscent of that in Fire Country, of poorer quality, perhaps one of those farming villages in the countryside he'd been to on occasional C-rank missions. Team 7 came to mind instantly, and he felt his mouth quirk up into a fond smile. He could almost see it. Kakashi, reading that perverted book of his while lazing about silently, observing his team. Sasuke, with his ever-present scowl, tugging at weeds himself, switching between complaining at Kakashi-sensei and trading jibes with Sasuke, and Sakura scolding him for insulting her precious Sasuke-kun. His smile grew. He missed those times. There weren't any electrical posts nor wires hanging up above, so they probably didn't have any electricity thought in this region. At least that put them well behind the element nations in terms of technological advancement. He had to assume that if they didn't have electricity, then ovens, lights, water heating, communication devices, and so much else wouldn't be present either. Did that mean they lit fires at home to cook food and heat water and light torches to go out at night? He hadn't really considered it before, but now that he thought about it, electricity was such a big part of the people's daily lives back in the elemental nations. Such a stark contrast made him feel completely alien and drove home the fact that he didn't belong here. Absently pondering the nature of this new world, Naruto's stroll came to an abrupt halt when he noticed a small group of guys chatting near one of the food stalls. They wore uniforms nearly identical to those he'd seen outside the walls, except for the hooded cloaks and metal containers. Also, he noted that the insignia emblazoned on their backs was different. 2 roses over a shield. How strange. Was it some other military order like the Konoha military police force? Maybe. Just as he was about to walk away, he noticed another person approaching. Recognition dawned on Naruto instantly, and he felt a sudden surge of panic. Gunta, what was he doing here? Were they onto him this fast? His heart pounded just a little faster at the thought. He watched his gun to approach the group of soldiers, talk for a bit before they shook their heads. Gunta let out an audible sigh and went on his way. He knew from his clone's memories that the winged soldiers had stopped some 10 odd leagues southwest from his current location. How could they have known to search here of all places? It could be pure luck, or just that this was the only place they could reasonably search with what little manpower they had. Well, whatever the case, he needed to get out of here. With the winged soldiers snooping around, he wouldn't be able to do what he needed to without getting on their radar. If he were to try to communicate with someone in a language people didn't recognize, they would get curious and start spreading rumors. If said soldiers were to hear those, they'd immediately know he was in the area and doubtlessly do whatever they could to make sure he couldn't escape. Of course he would escape whatever they tried, but the less attention he attracted, better. He didn't want to have to be on an endless run from one place to the next until he learned their language. would lay low resolute. Naruto walked towards the inner gate intent on staking out the place so long as they didn't ask any questions he could slip by unnoticed. As he approached, however, he saw guards posted near the gates, not normal ones either, but those with wings instead of roses. They didn't do much except watch those who passed through and ask questions, not that he could understand. Craning his neck, he checked the top of the walls for any openings, and to his annoyance there were soldiers there too. Erwin linked his hands together on the table, mulling over their current predicament. They'd reached the Survey Corps HQ not long ago. It had been a hectic few hours, to be sure. The foreigner had vanished again. To his dismay, scouts were sent out to search for him, but hadn't turned up with any results as of yet. Next to him, Mike peered out of the window, silent always, while Levy and Hands receded across from himself. Erwin, have there been any clues as to his whereabouts? Handcast, nothing, Erwin replied, and Levy scowled. We should have tied the brat up. I don't imagine we'll be including him in our reports. Hands questioned. No, our failure to bring him back and subsequently allowing him entrance into the walls will surely be seen as endangering the populace. If we were to report it, the consequences would be unpleasant. Hands peered down on the maps Erwin was staring at. Where do you think he could be with the speed displayed on our way back? He could be anywhere, Levy put in. That is true. Absent men to Koreans in the nearest villages outside the district. We don't have the manpower to spread out more, and if we were to, the MPS would surely get suspicious and start their own investigation. Levy nodded and Hange hummed thoughtfully. Naruto's POV. The sun set and the shadows grew longer until night fell. At last the common folk had gone home except for the occasional drunkard or beggar. When he was sure no one could see him, he used the hinge again, veiling his body within a cloak of chakra. From another's perspective, it would appear as though he had vanished completely. Wall guard POV. Man, it's getting late, yawned Lin. How long do you reckon we have to be up here? Lin sighed. I don't know, until the commander sends for us. I guess. Penning rubbed his eyes tiredly. Staying awake was becoming more difficult with each passing hour. Stress from being out on an expedition had taken its toll. Add to that an entire day of riding, and the exhaustion was becoming too much to bear. He just wanted a full meal and a nice soft bed right now. Say, why are we up here to begin with? He asked, hoping some small talk would stop him from falling asleep. Do they really believe the guy could get all the way up here without 3D maneuver gear? It's 50 meters up here. Lin took a swig from her water skin, then poured some on her hand to wash her face. She wore a contemplative expression while peeling away some of the wet locks of hair stuck to her face. You wouldn't have seen it, would you? You were in the rear guard after all. But I saw him take out a titan with his bare hands. Henning, seeing the doubtful look on his face, she continued, I know it sounds far-fetched, ridiculous even, but I saw it, and I also saw him jump like 10 meters into the air, stick to the side of a tree like a spider to a wall. If he can do all that, then I doubt scaling this wall is going to be much of an issue. He didn't respond to that. Silently going over her word, he halted mid-sentence when suddenly the lights from the flames flickered, and for a moment it was just a shade darker. He blinked and it was back to normal, and he had to wonder if it was just his mind playing tricks on him. Penning Lin glanced at him sideways. She appeared to be oblivious to whatever it was that he'd seen. I saw him in the forest. He was just a kid, looked about the same age as my little brother. Lin hummed. How is he, by the way? Your little brother? I remember you telling me he went to work at a farm. He smiled. Yeah, he's all right. He dropped out. Lin asked, voice soft. Yeah, he wrote to me telling me he didn't feel cut out to be a soldier, and to be honest, I'm glad. I'm sure he would have picked the Survey Corps if he'd graduated. He used to talk about defeating the Titans and becoming heroes when we were kids. Henning smiled fondly at the memory, and he heard Lin chuckled quietly. Naruto POV. The henge could be an exceptionally useful jutsu despite its E-rank status, hence why it was one of the 3 jutsu required to pass the academy. It made it possible to disguise oneself as another person, an animal, a plant, or even an inanimate object. Ajin jutsu, not too different from the normal bunshin, where one used chakra to weave an illusion around one's body, which came in handy during infiltration and information gathering. However, it had many glaring weaknesses, one being the fact that any physical contact would give away the disguise. That was if they didn't sense the use of chakra first. If you are skilled enough to avoid physical contact and being sensed, one had only to look at the ground to realize the shadow didn't match the illusion. That was precisely why transforming into an inanimate object, or basically anything that wasn't a human being, was a bad idea. However, minor changes like dyeing your hair, changing eye color, and altering skin tone was still very much useful and easily managed. You'd have to be a darn good sensor as well to notice the microscopic amount of chakra needed to make those alterations. All those weaknesses had been rendered null and void in this new world, with the exception of physical contact. Yet Naruto had learned a more useful way of applying this jutsu. Jiraiya, in a moment of genius driven by his ever-present wish of being able to peep at women in the hot springs undetected, had developed an improved version of the henge, one which used chakra to refract light around an object in a myriad of different angles, creating dead spots that hid the object from others' view. It bends light like a glass of water does when a spoon or straw inside it looks bent. It didn't require much but potent chakra to use, and of the top of his head Naruto could only name a couple of people capable using it. The Jinchuriki were a given. Jiraiya, Kasama, and perhaps a committee chose a 2. Still, it had its own weaknesses, being that it was even easier for sensors to detect, and it still couldn't refract all light. If one were to focus enough, they would be able to make out the slight distortion created in space. His musings ended as he touched down on the ground. On the other side of the wall there was a smaller city on this side of the wall, and the next wall could be seen far in the distance, barely discernible over curving horizon. A few days later, shopkeeper POV knock knock. Jurgen, startled awake, almost falling off his chair belatedly, he realized he'd fallen asleep while reading the newspaper. He leaned back to look into the store and saw a teen by the counter. "I'll be right there, just one moment," he called out. Cursed not for the first time when in his hurry to stand up his back pain reared its ugly head. "Damned old age. Hello there, young man, what can I do for you?" he greeted with a pleasant smile as he walked up behind the counter. The teen didn't respond, pushed a book forward awkwardly. Jurgen took it and inspected it with some bemusement. It was a children's picture book, one outlining the alphabet, teaching the most elementary things about their language. "You want this book?" he asked curiously. In response, the kid pointed at his ears, then made an X with his fingers. Jurgen winced sympathetically, but before he could say anything the teen dropped a few copper coins and a pair of silver on the desk. He grabbed one of the silver coins. In truth, the book cost a bit less, but all the coppers combined didn't amount to half book's price. Besides, these were desperate times. He handed the book over with a small smile, which the boy returned before retreating to the streets. Naruto's POV. Naruto let his eyes roam over the pages of his newly acquired book. The alphabet was simplistic to say the least, just a few connected lines, nothing like the complex writing used back in the elemental nations. To his surprise, he recognized some of the letters of BC. The ends they were the same characters used in the ranking system back home. It had never occurred to him how different those particular letters had been from the normal alphabet. Did this mean that his people had been in contact with walled people at some point, or was it mere coincidence? Deciding not to dwell on it too long, he made a shadow clone and set it to the task of writing down translations next to the pictures on the pages. He had no idea how to pronounce the words, but memorizing the characters needed to spell the words would be a major step forward. Pre-prepared cards, each with a word shown in the correct order, would go a long way in helping him settle into this society, especially with his "I am deaf" act. Still, he would have to learn at some point. The question was how. He heaved a sigh. He physically pained him to have to say this, but he would most likely have to find a school somewhere and spy on their lessons. Erica would have a laughing if he ever found out. 2 months later, Stoges ate apple. The lady at counter giggled at his childish pronunciation, and Naruto flushed. It was embarrassing to have to talk like a child despite being almost a man grown. They probably thought he was dim-witted or something. The woman handed him his product, and he handed her the money, mumbling a quick dank scone before departing. He'd made some progress in his learning, but there was only so much one could learn through books, and it had gotten tedious very quickly. Though had never been the bookish type to begin with, he learned best by doing, and the best way to learn how to speak was by conversing with others. And so he dropped the deaf act and started talking to people. Spying on lessons at the local school had been helpful as well. It had taught him how to pronounce each letter and string together some short sentences, as well as some new things about this society and its history in general. He was glad to note that the numeric system remained the same, at least as he walked down the busy streets. He recounted some facts. Firstly, Titans ate humans, and it had been that way for a long time, apparently 100 years even. However, it was only recently that the outer wall had been breached. As a result, lots of people had died, and those who didn't had fled into the next wall. There were 3 walls in total, named Sina, Rose, and Maria. There were also 3 military branches: the Military Police, Garrison Regiment, and the Survey Corps, each with a different purpose. The military police maintained peace and order within the walls, kind of like the Konoha military police force, and acts as the personal guard to this place's version of a daimyo. The Garrison Regiment maintain and guard the wall, and lastly the Survey Corps goes on expeditions outside the walls. That about summed up most of it. It wasn't much, but it was progress, at least, no matter how minor. He passed through the gate to Wall Rose and headed towards the refugee camp situated a short way ahead. After a while of sleeping out in the open, he'd been discovered by a garrison member and promptly directed to the nearest one, explaining that it offered housing and meals for a short period. It was nice to have a roof over his head and some filling meals. He'd been approached by some of the people working there a few days ago, telling him they had found a place for him to work down south on a farm approximately half a year before the trust breach. Krista, give it up." Emir's muffled voice reached Krista, but she refused to listen. She could do this. She had to listen to me. No. Emir watched her small frame tugging at Daz's unmoving body, slogging through snow that reached their shins. Has already had one foot in the grave. It's his own fault for doing this training to boost his score without knowing how much his body can take. He's just not cut out to be a soldier. If you keep crawling to the foot of the mountain at this rate, probably be a goner by then, and we'd be lucky not to be." She stopped and looked around for good measure, making sure they weren't going in circles before turning back to Krista. "Which means there are only 2 outcomes: leave Des here and save ourselves, or all 3 of us die. Which will it be?" Krista stopped giving Emir's point a second of consideration before steeling herself. "You forgot one," Krista said as her eyes focused on the road ahead, "the one where I'll be able to reach our base at the foot of the mountain with Daz. You can go ahead of us and get back safe. How about that?" Krista turned, flashing a confident smile. "There's no trouble in it for you. Will make it back for sure, so go ahead of us." She faced the head, gripping the rope tightly, and trotted onward. She didn't make it far. However, only a couple of steps, and she slipped exhausted. Even if she didn't want to admit it, still she resolved herself to keep going before standing and trying again. Emmer eyed her stoically, then heaved a sigh. She removed the scarf around her face to make sure Krista could hear her. The weather wasn't letting up, and the raging winds and downpour of snow made conversation near impossible. Say, why haven't you asked me to help at all? You know what I think that you have no intention of saving Das. Krista froze in her tracks, words striking too close to home for comfort. Slowly Emmer walked up beside her, leaning in to whisper in her ear, you don't care, you've resigned yourself to death already. Hoping to die here, aren't you? Krista felt her heart start beating faster as she processed those words, and Emmer leaned even closer, face almost mocking. How could you? I thought you were a good girl. You've got to at least make it look like you're trying to save his life if you want people to remember you as a hero who died trying to save someone else. Don't drag him down with you. That's what a bad girl would do. Why, you're wrong. I didn't. That's not I. Her voice trailed off, almost trembling. It's you, isn't it? Emmer asked, standing straight again. The mistress's daughter who had people after your life kissed. His eyes widened and she looked up to meet him. Her eyes, how did you? I see, so it was you after all. I happened to overhear a conversation at the church back when I snuck around borrowing things to stay alive. What a sob story. It was an illegitimate child can't succeed. A noble, so they wanted her dead to end all the fuss once and for all, but they'd look aside if she changed her name and lived a humble life. In the end, I heard the girl was forced to join the cadet corps. There was a pause. Don't worry, I haven't told anyone. I don't plan to either. Krista let out a shaky breath. Then did you join the cadet corps just to find me? If that's the case, why? Emmer looked away, refusing to meet her gaze. Who knows, maybe because we're similar. What, you and me have similar backgrounds? Well, more or less that's the reason you became a soldier. Could be, I don't really know it. Not you wanted to become friends with me? Emmer turned away, suddenly feeling embarrassed. How you've got to be kidding me. You and I don't even compare. We both got a second chance at life, but I'm not the one who took on a fake name. If I abandon my name and reject who I am, they win. I'm going to keep the name I have and make the best of my life. That's the one and only way I can get my revenge. Emmer had an intense look in her eyes. So how do you explain yourself? Are you going to commit suicide and make everyone who ruined your life happy? Why is your desire to kill aimed at yourself? If you're so eager, use that passion to change your own fate. By I can't even now. There's no way for all three of us to make it out of this alive. There is. Emmer made her way through the snow to the edge of the cliff, and Kristoff followed, dragging an unconscious Das behind her. I can see the base straight down from here. We dropped as off this cliff. What? Hopefully he survives the fall, and hopefully someone down there finds him. Sure, it might be a long shot, but that's his only real chance. Unless some miracle happens, he'll be in ice long before you drag him down. But he'll die for sure if he falls, Krista protested, and Emmer gritted her teeth. Annoyed, she stalked back to the smaller girl, picking her up. Hi, Emmer, quit it. Shut up, Emmer. Put me down. I'll do it myself. So just excuse me. They both froze at the sudden voice from behind and turned to look to where it had come from. Krista, still perched on Emmer's shoulder. Are you guys lost? Only a short distance away stood a person, male by sound of it, clad in a thick fur coat. Naruto marched through the thick layer of snow, carrying a pile of wood on the small contraption on his back. The winds blew with the vengeance, frosty gusts almost like whips on what little of his face wasn't covered by his scarf. He would have preferred not to be out here today, but it couldn't be helped. The farm was short on wood, and it was too cold to tough it out. Seeing his firewood was essential for people around here, especially during the winter. Naruto had offered to go gather some. The elderly couple who owned the farm had protested, of course, told him to stay in until he calmed down outside, but he doubted it would. This weather hadn't let up for the past few days. Spotting something off in the distance, Naruto narrowed his eyes. It was faint, but there was a soft light far off in a small open area beyond the forest. Other people, perhaps furious, he made his way towards the source. Soon he could see two figures near the edge of a cliff. They wore fur cloaks with insignia emblazoned on the backs. Two swords crossed over a shield. So cadets, then what were they doing out here? Inch closer, careful not to reveal himself. No way for all three of us to make it out of this alive. There is girls by the sound of it. Damn. Now he kind of felt like a pervert. Damn, you arose. No wait, did she say three? Then he noticed the sledge, and it clicked. They were carrying someone with them, a teammate perhaps. I can see the base straight down from here. We dropped as off this cliff. Naruto gaped. What? The other smaller girl questioned, sounding as shocked as he felt. Hopefully he survives the fall, and hopefully someone down there finds him. Sure, it might be a long shot, but that's his only real chance. Unless some miracle happens, he'll be an icicle long before you drag him down, but he'll die for sure if he falls. The smaller one protested before the other went and picked her up. Oh boy, he'd better step in before things got completely out of hand. Hey Emmer, quit it. Shut up, Emmer. Put me down. I'll do it myself. So just excuse me, Naruto called out, and they both froze mid-step. Naruto's sweat dropped. He would have laughed at the comical sight if it hadn't been for the fact that this Emmer girl had so casually offered to throw the baggage off a cliff. You guys lost? They seemed shocked for a second before the blonde one wrestled herself out of Emmer's grip. She hurried over and stopped right in front of him, panting slightly. Why, yes we are. Did the instructors send you? She asked. I is hopeful now that she was close. Naruto could make out her facial features. Her hair was the shade of gold, and she had big blue eyes, small nose, and pouty lips. She was staring at him so intently that he found himself rubbing the back of his head in mild embarrassment. No, I am not with the cadets. Oh, she looked downcast at that. Why are you out here then? The other girl asked, crossing her arms. Naruto turned a bit to show his backpack, gathering wood. Actually, I work at a farm nearby in this weather. And your question? With a raised eyebrow, to which he replied with a shrug, we're actually supposed to get all the way down there. You wouldn't know a way down close by. Krista pointed down to the small encampment at the foot of the hill then. She cast a glance behind her at the guy shivering on the sledge. Our teammate, he's freezing to death. We need to hurry. Naruto thought about it for a second. Well, there's a way down. It's steep though. People usually avoid it during winter since it's easy to lose your footing. Wouldn't want any nasty accidents out here. Relieved, she nodded. Paul, right, come on. Naruto beckoned as he started off. Wait, you're coming too? Why not just tell us where to go? Emir asked. You're lost in a forest. It's the middle of the night. There's a snowstorm going on and you're dragging an injured person. Naruto deadpans. I don't think it'd be a wise idea to let you wander off with some vague directions. Fair enough. They waited until Chursta came back dragging Daz. It was obvious that she was struggling with the weight and Naruto offered to take him off her hands. Are you sure? Want to be heavy for you too? Naruto just smiled genially. Don't worry about it. Thank you. I'm kissed by the way, and this is Emir. Feels fut's nice to meet you. He barely registered. Wait, as he walked, the chakra circulating in his body made it a piece of cake. Really, the fact that it also helped keep some of the cold at bay was an added bonus. So military training is it? Naruto questioned, not liking the awkward silence. Yeah, optional one though. Cheers to clarified. Graduation is only a couple of months away. It's for those who want extra points. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Extra points and military? Emir returned the disbelief. You don't know. When Naruto didn't show any sign of comprehension, she continued. Well, there's this ranking system in the cadet corps. Only the top 10 are allowed to join the military police on the day of selection, and getting into the military police guarantees you a spot in wall scene. And Naruto bobbed his head. It's pretty common knowledge. You know, you've been living under a rock or something. Naruto chuckled. Or something, I'd say. When he didn't elaborate, Emir shrugged and let the matter drop. 20 or so minutes later they finally arrived at the destination, and true to Naruto's words, it was a steep hillside, some snow-crusted rocks sticking out at odd angles. Here we are. Naruto gestured down. How do we get the sledge down there though? Kista wondered out loud. I think it'd be wise to just let the sled slide down while I carry your friend over there, Naruto said. Then he moved to brush off the snow gathering on Daz's body and lifted him over his shoulder in a soldier carry. You know, you're being awfully helpful for some guy we just met a couple of minutes ago. Should I be worried? Emir drawled, eyeing him side long. Yeah, well, that's just me, I guess. They let the sledge slide down to the foot of the hill where it lay haphazardly after toppling over. The descent was a slow process, the two girls tracing his tracks to avoid stepping on unstable footing. Fortunately, they made it down in one piece. From here on, you'll have to get back on your own, I'm afraid. Would see you all the way, but I've got some people waiting on me. Wouldn't do to let them freeze to death. Naruto chuckled. Shirsta shook her head. You've done plenty, thank you. She smiled gratefully. Emir nodded as well. Thanks. They said their farewells and parted ways. Naruto back up the hill while Krista and Nimmer made for the encampment with the rest of the cadets. Irie fastened his backpack. It's better if you guys don't come along. Like our instructors said, you'll only end up becoming more victims and going, so that doesn't happen. Mikasa replied, I'm not leaving. Krista and the others. Armin added. When Irene turned to reply, he saw two others by the door. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Riener's voice was unmistakable. He stood with Berthold by his side, both decked in full winter gear. Don't try to stop, you're gonna need a lot more gear than that, Berthold interjected before Aran could finish it. You go by yourselves, you'll be in the same pickle as Krista in a search. It's better with more eyes, you guys. Thanks, to be honest, we could use you. Iron smiled. Hey, another voice piped up. It was Connie, and with him Sasha and Marco were coming too. Mark waved a hand. The weather's steadily improving, I think we'll be fine, and I brought extra rations. Irene felt a smile tugging at his lips. He nodded, and they all moved as one. They didn't get far, however, for as soon as they stepped foot out the door, they spied Krista and Emir stalking towards the hut, dragging something behind them. Hua, Krista, Dimmer, they cried out, making the two in question look up. You're back, Sasha cheered. Huh, yeah, just arrived. Actually, mind helping us with this dead weight? The Emir pointed down a desk. Not long after, they all sat inside by the fire, having checked in with instructors. So what happened? What held you for so long? Armin asked curiously. Krista sipped at the mug of warm tea. We fell behind the rest of you, and the snow made it hard to track the way back. And then there was Daz as well, Emir added. Riener crossed his arms where he leant by the door frame. How do you get back? Then we get help. Kelpia meant some guy named Niels showed us a shortcut down the cliff. Tony balked. Wait, there was someone else out in this weather? Yeah, Krista answered. He works at a farm nearby. They needed wood for a fire. Bertolt spoke up. You got lucky then. Don't think Daz would have lasted much longer. The two hummed in agreement, and the rest of the night was spent chatting by the fire, comparing times and making jokes. Trust the day after the disbanding ceremony, 6 months after the snow mission, the Ren gaped. Connie, you're joining the scouts, but you were going on and on about joining the military police. Yeah, I know, but Connie mumbled. Abashed, Lena giggled. But seems like your speech yesterday changed someone's mind. Shut up. Con turned away to hide his embarrassment. It was my own decision. Don't be so shy about it. You're not the only one, Thomas put in, smiling. Thomas, you. Iron felt lighter at their words. Guys, Sasha piped up from behind, leaning over conspiratorially. I bar some meat from the officers' morning rations. She pulled a tied-up roll of fat trimmed meat from her jacket, drooling all the while. Her reactions were instantaneous. Sasha, are you mad? You want to be sent to solitary confinement? Potato Girl, real idiocy is scary. She ignored their comments, her one-track mind already envisioning the delightful taste of juicy, tender, delicious beef and all the different ways of cooking it. Let's all share together. Later we'll cook it and eat it with bread. She shivered at the mere thought, sounding more like a starved animal than human. Go put it back, Sasha. Meat is a luxury now. That we've lost so much land, Mina chided. Don't worry about it, Sasha replied whilst hiding the meat in one of empty crates. We can just raise more pigs and cows once we retake our land. Samuel, who'd been staring disbelievingly until now, snapped out of it. I'll take some of that meat. The dam broke me to save my part. To me as well. That goes double for me. Around watched them amusedly. Guys, what do you say? Iron, they'll find us out if we don't get back to work. Samuel went back to cleaning the cannon. It's still a while until lunch, Nina added, and went to work on another. Hirn smiled and gazed out over Trot District, watching the houses and streets and people the size of ants flitting about. It's been 5 years. Mankind's finally regaining its dignity. We can win. He felt his determination strengthen. His dream of joining the Survey Corps was just around the corner. Humanity counterattack begins now. Boom. Naruto's POV. Barut strolled the worn cobble streets of Trust, minding his own business, clutching a small paper bag filled with fresh fruit from the shopping district. The sun beat down from above, making his skin tingle with warmth without the language barrier hindering him. Everything had become significantly easier. He'd made no headway in finding a way home, though. Clones dispatched outside the walls found no traces of other people. One of the clones had glimpsed the ocean far to the east. Perhaps he'd try crossing it at some point, but until he'd scoured this land, that would have to wait. Curiously enough, his clones had noticed that there was a higher concentration of Titans in the south. Not just because Shijin China was there where Wall Maria had been breached, but outside as well. The Titans had to come from somewhere, right? Maybe their place of origin was in that direction, and so he'd established himself in Trust's southernmost city. Now that Wall Maria was overrun, thought that he'd stayed in one place for too long anyway. Shadow clones would run out of chakra after a while, so moving from one place to the next was essential to make sure they could travel as far as possible. Summoning the toads from Mount Mayaboku had borne no results either. The chakra requirement was simply too steep. Trying to summon them felt like trying to budge an actual mountain. It wouldn't give an inch. The homesickness was bad. He wanted to see, and the rest of his reins he yearned for the view from atop the hawkish mountain. The taste of Ikaraku ramen, the thrill of a spar he'd taken to studying Titans, investigating the walls and its people, training, exploring the lands beyond the wall, anything to quench his longing for home. He sighed. At least he could help some people around here. Just a few days ago, he'd happened upon some petty thugs trying to mug an old man in an alley during night one ass swapping. Later, Naruto had left the alley chatting with a stunned but grateful old man in a pile of beaten thugs in his wake. He picked out one of the riper apples from his bag and bit into it, a trail of juice trickling down the corner of his mouth. Boom, a sound like the roar of thunder, and the world turned bright yellow. For just an instant his apple dropped to the ground. Forgotten years as a shinobi saw him, alert and ready in an instant, head whipping around to the source only to widen at the sight of a humongous fleshy head peeking over the wall. Gets lips peeled back to display a row of perfect teeth, skull bared, and crimson muscles rippling. Just for a moment time seemed to stand still, the world frozen, spellbound, broken only by the Titan's foot smashing through the outer gate of Trust. Then all hell broke loose. All around him people ran, fearful for their lives and heedless of whoever else they trampled over to get to safety. Some were screaming, others crying, some just shocked numb. From his perch atop one of the taller buildings he could see the Titans starting to stream through the 8-meter hole in Trust's outer gate. Yeah, this was bad, really bad. Military had mobilized immediately, soldiers rushing towards the breach to keep the Titans at bay while the populace evacuated. He'd contemplated keeping his cover, but for what, around a year in this foreign land, and he still had no clue about how to get home. Yes, he might get in trouble with the military, but honestly, what the could they even do to him? If they tried to arrest him, he'd just use another hinge. Besides, Rasengan was ultimately a universal get out of jail card. On the other hand, if he could convince them to cooperate, it'd make everything so much easier for all of them. He could take out Titans, and in return they would give him the information he sought. Either way, it wasn't his style to let people suffer when he had the power to save them. He nodded to himself, pleased. Kakashi would have been proud of him. His logic was unquestionable. He cracked his knuckles, grinning. Random trainee POV. Dina fumbled at her gear, but to no avail. Something was wrong with the handles, making it so the hooks wouldn't fire. The Titan she'd been trying to maneuver around came lumbering out from behind a building. Her blood froze at the sight. Motionless, she hoped to avoid catching its attention, but it was ultimately useless. It reared its ugly head, manic eyes zeroing in on her position. She felt tears singing at the corners of her eyes, threatening to spill. This was how she would die, eaten by a Titan with not a soul around to witness it. Her life would amount to nothing more than another digit in the death tally. She watched its hulking form creep closer, or one earth-shittering step at the time. Morbidly, she wondered if there would be anything left of her body to bring home. Her back against the wall, she slid down helplessly, hands covering her head and eyes shut tight. Damn it, I don't want to die, please, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. Her head whipped up just in time to see the flesh on Titan's nape explode, blood and gore everywhere. The Titan's bulk hit the ground, steam rising from its already disintegrating body. Then someone came flying through the smoke, landing just in front of her. He stood. You all right? I saw you were fumbling with your gear. Is it broken? Dina gaped, too shocked to reply. He raised an eyebrow, stepped closer, and waved a hand in front of her face. Hello, you good? She couldn't find the words. Did he kill that Titan? Her eyes flickered wildly between the steaming core and her apparent savior. Powell, he has no gear in the Titan's neck. It just exploded. Boy, snap out of it. What's wrong with your gear? She blinks twice by it. It's broken. The hooks won't fire. He nodded. Pull right, then hold tight. Suddenly she was off the ground, slung unceremoniously over one shoulder and being carried up the wall. Weight up the wall, she stared down towards the retreating pavement. The ground was actually moving farther and farther away. They were going up the wall with no gear. Her hands dug into his clothes, holding on for dear life. Okay, we're up. You can let go of me now. Dina cracked one eye open tentatively, and true enough, they were on the wall. She released him and was set down. She wobbled unsteadily on her feet, slightly nauseous. By I, we how did you should get a move on, he said, cutting her blabbering short. There are soldiers on standby on the other side of the inner gate. Run over there and give them a shout. They'll help you down. She didn't get to reply before he jumped over the edge unconsciously. She reached out to pull him back to safety, but he was gone and she stood alone atop the wall. What the hell just happened? First clone POV. Naruto came to a halt when he spotted two children running for their lives, a boy and a girl. The boy was older, 10 or 11. He guessed the girl around 8. The titan chasing them was smaller than most, only about 3 meters tall. It didn't seem in any hurry either, strolling languidly after its prey, but even walking its long-legged strides made the titan difficult to outrun, especially for children. Wasting no time, Naruto swooped down like a bat out of hell, his chakra-enhanced kunai cleaving right through its neck, parting head from shoulders, and followed by an unholy spray of blood. Even headless, the thing continued to struggle, writhing on the ground, arms flailing about in a desperate attempt to grab whatever was nearby. He put an end to it with another well-placed cut to the nape. The kid stared at him in awe, almost disbelieving. Small wonder, Naruto mused, even geared and fully trained soldiers have a hard time killing these beasts. And here I am cutting them down like a scythe does grain. Wordlessly, he grabbed the two, one in each arm, and hopped off towards the nearest evacuation point. Jean, what do we do now? Connie asked. What can we do? We finally received the order to retreat, but we can't get over the wall because we're out of gas. Jean ran a hand through his hair in frustration. We're all going to die thanks to those cowards. You mean the support squad? Connie asked. What happened to them? Are they all dead? I'm guessing the Titans have them surrounded, which is why they can't supply us with gas. They've probably barricaded themselves within HQ. Jean explained. They probably lost their will to fight. That's exactly why we have no choice but to go all in on those Titans. Titans are just going to surround us too. He stepped closer to Jean, hands spread out beseechingly. If we keep running away from them, we'll just end up wasting what little gas we have left. Once we lose our mobility, it'll really be over. Dean just chuckled mercilessly. I never thought I'd hear you make an intelligent comment, Connie. He looked over to the other cadets gathered on the nearby roofs. But how do you propose we do that with the forces we have left? The vanguard has nearly been wiped out. Moreover, which one of us cadets could possibly take command over such an operation? He sighed, head bowed. Thought that we could do anything about the Titans. Even if someone took command, the storage is probably crawling with 3 to 4 meter Titans by now, and of course we can't fight them inside the storage. Connie's face fell. So it's hopeless. On the roof next to theirs, Sasha tried to motivate some of the trainees into action, desperately trying to raise their spirits, even going as far as to offer to lead the charge herself. It didn't matter, though none could muster up the courage nor will to proceed. Mikasa came next after being pointed towards the pale-faced cry. Armin, our unit. Armin began, voice choked. The 34th Cadet Unit. Thomas Wagner, Nick Tews, Milius, Zaramusky, Nina, Carolina. All 5 of them have fulfilled their duty and died heroic deaths in battle. He finished sobbing. That was like the final nail to the coffin. They're already brittle resolve falling apart amidst the whispers and quiet tears. No one noticed a blonde-haired youth land behind them. Boy, what's the situation here? Jean was the first of many to turn to the speaker. The first thing he noticed was distinct lack of military garb. A civilian? What are you doing? All the civilians should be evacuating. Never mind that, for now I can handle myself. Naruto groused. What's the hold up here? Is something wrong? Shouldn't you be getting out of here too? Low on gas. We need to get to HQ and refill, but it's overrun by Titans, Sasha explained. Naruto nodded. He took stock of their numbers and condition. A sorry-looking bunch, to be sure. Who's the highest-ranking soldier here? Connie shook his head. We're all just cadets. Naruto winced. They haven't even graduated, never been in a situation like this. There's no one around to take control and guide them. Man whose hands they're willing to place their lives into. He exhaled slowly. Everyone listen up, Naruto yelled, trying to emulate Kakashi during missions, voice stern and unyielding. The cadets straightened as he said, you're too low on gas to get to safety. Our only option is to get to HQ, but it's swarmed by Titans. Someone yelled. Yes, but staying out here is certain death. If we can get to HQ, there's still a chance we might survive, some of us at least. A blonde-haired, bored-looking girl stepped up next. And how do you propose we get there? Naruto met her blue eyes with his own. We need to move all together. The most skilled in front. Anyone else would have a lower chance of survival. A tall, well-built teen stepped up next. That would be the top 10. The Bert, Mikasa, Sasha, Connie, Annie, Jean, Marco, and Krista. Everyone's here besides Iron. Jean turned to Naruto, grim-faced. So the top 10 lead, exposing ourselves to the most danger. What about? You don't misunderstand. I'm glad someone's willing to take command, but what are you going to be doing? Naruto smirked. I'll be leading the 10 of you, of course. Jean laughed humorlessly. Heal, you don't even have gear. Are you even a soldier? He took the silence he got in return as an answer. It doesn't matter. Mikasa passed them all, cutting off whatever Jean was about to say and stopping at the edge of the roof. He's right. If we take out the Titans around HQ and replenish our gas, we can get to safety. But Mikasa, even with you here, there are just too many. Marco began. We can do it, she spoke, and stronger than all of you. I can kill all the Titans there even if I'm alone. leveled a blade at them. "You're either incompetent or you're spineless cowards. How pathetic. Hey Mikasa, what are you saying?" One girl shouted. "You want to fight all those titans by yourself? There's no way you can do that." Another added, "If I can't, I'll just die. But if I win, I live. Unless I fight, I can't win." Mikasa replied, turning her back on them, and took off. Naruto watched, eyebrow raised. Motivational speeches are all well and good, but darting off like that is reckless. We should pick out the safest, least gas-consuming route at the very least. Next to him, Jean clenched his teeth. "Your attempt at motivation is what's pathetic. Was the point of that shock us into action? Damn it, I blame you for this, Iran," he mumbled. Then in a louder voice, "Hey, were we trained to let our comrades fight alone? At this rate, we'll turn out to be spineless cowards." Jean followed after Mikasa. Others steadily trickled after. Sasha was about to follow herself when she noticed Naruto and remembered he had no gear. She jogged over. "Hey, you're gonna need someone to carry you since you don't have gear." A pause, hesitation in her eyes before bracing herself. "I can. It's fine." She's willing to offer help even though it would decrease her own chances of survival. He smiled. "I can manage, but thanks for asking." He flicked his head towards the leaving cadets. "We should get moving, else we'll get left behind." Chakra flowing through his every limb, he jumped, leaping mightily over houses, streets, and stunned trainees. The disbelieving shouts echoing behind him only served to make him laugh. "Jinpyo, it's no use," Jean thought bleakly, eyes focused on the HQ building in the distance towering over all else. "We won't get close to HQ unless we're prepared to make sacrifices." A horror-filled scream made it to his ears, and he turned to look down at the streets where it had come from. Some soldier, dark-haired and fairly tall, stood hunched over, crying, "Gear," refusing to reel him in. "Damn, he's out of gas." Jean wanted to move to help, but with multiple titans converging on the poor guy, he knew better. The titans were in arm's distance, and the man grew hysterical. "Stay away, please." "No, Tom, I'm going to save you," someone yelled. One guy and a girl flying to the rescue. "Stop, you can't, it's too late," Jean called after the two as they rushed past him, but his words fell on deaf ears. Too focused on saving his friend, the male failed to notice one of the nearby titans and was snatched out of the air. Soon he too was screaming for help. Jean watched as the titan brought him closer to its mouth, uncaring of any wailing and begging. Next to him, the female soldier was grabbed by another 3D hand. Meanwhile, Tom had his head crushed between his captor's knowing teeth. "Why couldn't I stop them? If I had stopped them, even by force, this wouldn't have happened." Jean thought, "Am I really cut out for this? Am I really fit to have a position of such responsibility?" Suddenly the 9-meter titan's neck was complete gone, obliterated by what looked like a moving distortion in space that Jean could barely even see. The titan went limp and its prey was dropped carelessly on ground. Then a yellow blur flew by as fast as a speeding bullet, and the fingers that held the female soldier were severed, clattering on the ground and squirting blood. The titan screamed and the girl was caught midair by Jean. Did a spit take? It's the guy. Naruto POV. The reactions to his style of travel had been hilarious, ranging from cries of disbelief to just outright gaping. One had even been so surprised that he misfired his hooks. Good thing Naruto had caught him right before his face got acquainted with the pavement. As he was about to catch up with the head of the group, he spotted two soldiers ahead, trapped and about to be eaten. Mentally he measured the distance and time it would take to reach them. They're too far away. His hands flashed through a pair of Seal's tiger dog. He drew in an enormous breath, lungs filled to bursting, then exhaled all at once, wind-style vacuum. Great sphere. His jutsu traveled at sonic speeds, disintegrating all in its path, which just so happened to be the titan neck and by extension the nape. The titan's head crashed face first onto the ground, body following shortly after. He turned his attention to the 12-meter titan holding the girl. Without wasting a second, he drew out two kunai channeled chakra. A miasma of blue energy came to life around them, split into two currents that ground against each other to create ethereal blades of extraordinary sharpness, just the way Asuma had taught him in Sora. What felt like a lifetime ago, they wouldn't be able to cut out the entire nape. He knew the blades simply weren't long enough to slice that deep. Silently he cursed the fact that he hadn't expanded upon Asuma's lessons. He had been naturally inclined towards Taijutsu too, and ninjutsu, and so a kenjutsu technique had seemed unnecessary. Now, however, a wind blade with its longer reach and unparalleled cutting prowess would have been perfect. Nonetheless, his enhanced kunai went through the titan's fingers like a hot knife through butter. He snatched the female soldier midair, then hopping over to the male, slung him over his shoulder and dropped them off safely on a tall building. Jin POV. Jean watched the civilian. If that was indeed what he was, put the two soldiers down. He asked them a few questions. "Are you hurt? Is your gear fine?" Which the trainees barely managed to answer, scared shitless they blubbered some incoherent answers through choked sobs and tears, thanking him profusely between each sentence. "What was that?" someone whispered next to him. Marco, going by the voice and sounding about as confused and odd. Jean felt all the other trainees were openly gawking at what they'd just witnessed. The stranger, on the other hand, merely sheathed his little dagger, if it could even be called that. Never had Jean seen such a strange weapon. Honestly, it looked more like a failed attempt at a spearhead than anything else. The guy paused to glance curiously at the slow, disintegrating corpse before addressing the crowd of onlookers. "I'll clear a path towards HQ. Follow behind me and don't stray too far away. We're almost there." Blondie led them as he'd said he would, killing every titan in his path with astonishing ease, using abilities unheard of. They arrived at HQ not long after, crashing through the tinted glass windows on the second floor. Currently, Jean, like the rest of his fellow trainees, was in shock. The way he moved, jumping from building to building effortlessly, that's just not possible. And the way he destroyed those titans, he exploded their napes. Not even cannons do that kind of damage. It is far Beyond what any human is capable of. Looking around, there were fewer people than what they'd set out with. Not everyone had made it, not by a long shot. Some had been grabbed by the occasional titan that they'd tried to maneuver around. Some had lagged behind, others had run out of gas. People had died, and it was terrible, but Jean had no delusions. If that stranger hadn't come along and helped, there wouldn't be as many people in here as there were. They stood in silence, the only noise the rumbling footfalls of titans outside. With each booming step the ground trembled, the castle shaking ever so slightly, throwing small clouds of dust into the air. "Hey," Reiner shouted, startling the trainees, his face uncharacteristically serious. "Just who and what the hell are you?" Their savior smirked in a way that could almost be considered arrogant. "The name's Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm a ninja. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, and comment down your opinion on this video. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.